Welcome back to the channel. Joined once again by Dr. Mark Ball. Mark showed me 10-15 years ago the posture belt, which most of my players have at some point experienced, a drill or a couple of movement patterns that I wanted them to kind of work on in their swing using the posture belt. But it also presents that great connection between training and movement away from the golf course to movement in your swing. So Mark, we're going to go over a couple of exercises today that could be really good ones for players out there. We'll go over some generic ones that are typically good for a lot of players. Hopefully you enjoy this, and I'm sure it'll give a little insight as to how to connect movement away from your golf swing into your golf swing. Thanks for joining me again today. Always really appreciate players tuning in to learn more about the games and maybe pick up a couple of tips and philosophies to help them with their game. Today, once again, joined by Dr. Mark Ball, and we're looking at the posture belt, and it really is a privilege from my standpoint to be able to share some of the philosophies and some of the movements with the posture belt. There really is a much more deeper meaning to the belt. As crazy as it may sound, if this is your first kind of interaction and kind of exposure to the belt, but it goes back to Ramsey McMaster, who was a mentor of yours. I never actually got to meet Ramsey, but there's a lot of philosophies and concepts around improvement and players and movement and just life that Ramsey shared with you that you've kind of passed on to me and many others. So please, yes, tell us a little bit about the belt, and then let's look at a couple of exercises that are just unbelievably helpful in many cases for so many players.
Thanks, Ian. I think it's wonderful you referenced Ramsey. Ramsey was a very dear friend of mine who unfortunately passed away many years ago, and they are the Ramsey posture belt. So I think it's, for multiple reasons, it's very important we continue the wonderful work and legacy that Ramsey kind of left with us. So these are absolutely not my design, they are Ramsey's design. It's very important we recognise that at every level. So the posture belt was wonderful for, really, as Ian mentioned, that connection between more conceptually how you're trying to move in the golf swing, with more anatomically kind of how the body, perhaps for example, would like to move. So there's that lovely kind of thread between our concepts of movement, the awareness of movement, with more the anatomical movements themselves. And the great thing about the belts, so you can use them anywhere. As you and I record this in your studio, onto the range, in the locker room at home, for example, the versatility on the belts is fantastic, and the feedback you receive post drills can often be hugely powerful in helping players move differently. So let's kind of go through maybe just a couple, because there are hundreds. So again, Ian, you and I could probably do multiple videos going through all the various drills, but this is a lovely kind of introduction to and a wake up to the belt. So you'll see here there's the kind of red and black tubing. So with the black tubing, just kind of step in the tubing so it goes underneath the arches of both feet. And if you and I then just kind of swap places so you kind of face the camera. And then with the red tubing kind of over the head, and then running through across the fingers at the front. So the idea that the kind of elbows are down, palms are forward. So you'll see in here, for example, this start position, elbows down, fingers up, palms forward. So just initially, to get that lovely connection between the shoulder blades, the scapula and the rib cage, the hand and arm, through into the pelvis, into foot and ankle. Just start to make some little kind of circle backwards. And as you start to circle, you can even then start to just very gently just start to stamp through both feet. So the stamp of the feet gets you very active through lower limb, the awareness of the pelvis, informally kind of through the glutes in particular, how the feet interact and sit on the floor, into the rib cage, the scapula, those kind of big oblique muscles that rotate us through the kind of the rib cage and the pelvis. As you then keep the stamping in, keep the circling, just start to make some very small rotations back, keeping the head somewhat kind of in the middle, so remain looking down at the ball. So that lovely kind of, again, connection between hand and arm. Players, for example, that experience lots of the elbow moving behind, or the club getting too far behind them, or for example, that kind of lead side, that pelvis collapsing downwards. This is a wonderful approach to then the connection between arms and rib cage to pelvis, pelvis into lower limb. Now in this case here, if right hand was the club face, allow me just to swap place it. If this was the club face, keeping the stamping, keeping the circles, keeping the rotation, how could you now move to then find impacts with that right hand? So again, that lovely control to the scapula, the arms and ribcage connection, into the pelvis, into foot and ankle. Once you've decided that's enough in, you can then stop. And this is very much around the endurance movement as well. Just start to really share your feedback and around your experience of using the belt to encourage movement.
Well, areas that really stood out to me there is, like, as I started the circles, first of all, when you're in the setup position, you really feel a sense of that connection between the rib cage and the pelvis, and you really get a good sense posturally of using your deep core muscles to kind of It does take you out of you a little bit. The deep core muscles there to kind of stabilize or engage at the start of the movement. Then in doing the circles, very much opening up through the rib cage. Control there, felt like I was working the scaps, felt like I'm working the glutes. Again, your awareness, you'd have to kind of, as you're going through it, be driven, kind of guided with your awareness because you feel it everywhere. From a rotational standpoint there, with this there, it felt actually a lot easier to rotate because I felt as though I was engaged in the right areas, my kind of supported with the rotation. And I hadn't actually mentioned this before, but I'm not really a huge fan of many kind of, not drills, but training aids out there because I find as though they don't provide that internal awareness that, that players often need. But the posture belt, if I had to have a player use something or either guide them with something, I feel as though this is something that could help every golfer. And Mark's got tons of different exercises you often share with players that purchase these. He produces them in England now. I'm now going to be distributing them throughout the US. But like I said, there's so many exercises with this. And I use it a lot with junior development, just any player that wants to develop their game over time. If you're invested in long-term improvement, just being exposed to some of the exercises with this is absolutely going to help you to move better. But yeah, I really like that one. I love the awareness of the right-handed club face there. I found it very kind of intuitive again. And with the belt on doing the movement, it just exaggerates and makes you much more highly aware of how the body's moving and where you feel it in certain places. So yeah, a really cool one that I would say I would personally want to use it before I warm up, before I hit balls, pretty much daily to become aware of my movement.